75% of Americans believe in UFOs. 30% of Americans believe UFOs are vehicles from other worlds. And 3% of Americans believe they have been abducted by aliens. That's over 8 million people. They're out there, aren't they?
Welcome to the UFO Files Show with your host, Jerry Pippin.
It was a wonderful trip over here. We took the helicopter. We had landed in Roswell. I announced to people when I landed that I had come in peace. Let me tell you, there are more 9 and 10-year-old boys around the country when I meet them. They ask me, have you been to Roswell? And is it true what they say? And I tell them, if I told you, I'd have to kill you. So, and their eyes get all big, so we're going to keep our secrets here.
And that's President Obama in New Mexico last week, and he was making, actually he's used that same line before about the UFO secrets, only he expanded it this time, and he said, we're going to keep the secrets here, and he was talking to everyone from New Mexico. And so that kind of makes me wonder, is there a secret code talk going on with the president to the public about Roswell? Hi, everyone. I'm Jerry Pippin, and welcome to our UFO show here on Inception Radio. And we're going to deal with Roswell completely tonight for the entire 2 hours. We got a couple other items we want to talk about before we go off the air. But Roswell has been the mecca for UFO research for a long time, since 1947, as a matter of fact. And we have a very interesting show. Later on, after we talk to our two guests, we are going to bring on the former editor of the Roswell newspaper, who was on duty in 1947. I believe he's 92 years old now, so I think you'll find that very interesting. He knew Colonel Blanchard. I just demoted him. Anyway, Blanchard later became a general, as a matter of fact. And I probably should stop talking a little bit about Roswell and get ready to bring in our guests, because both of them know just about everything that you'd ever want to know about the UFO crash in Roswell. They do tours of the Army Air Base and a few other things, and they got a big 65th anniversary coming up. So we'll get to that here in just a moment. But first of all, before I introduce our two guests, I want to give the telephone numbers, and you need to write this down, because we are going to open up the phone lines early and let you ask questions about Roswell, because our two guests, Noe Torres and E.J. Wilson, know just about everything there is to know about Roswell. And I think you'll figure that out when you start listening to them. So here's the number, 888-919-2355. I'll give that again. That's a toll-free number, 888-919-2355. Now, when you get it connected, you have to ask for the studio, punch 1, and get in there, and either our producer, Joe in Chicago, will talk to you, or you might just hear me. And just, if I don't come to you right away and you hear an opening, just jump in. I want to give that number again, and later on we'll do it again, 888-919-2355. Now, if you're bashful and you don't want to get on the air, we have a chat room at Inception Radio. It's already pretty full, but there's room for more. So come on in. Jane Swartley, our producer for the Jerry Pippin Show, is in there, and she'll be relaying questions to us as well from the chat room. And in addition to that, you can email me here at jerry@jerrypippin.com. Neither one of these guests are strangers to me. We've talked to them many times, visited with them in Roswell a couple of times. actually gone on a tour that they do about the Army Air Base, and we'll talk about that before it's over. Incredible experience, by the way. And so I'm not exaggerating when I say these two men know everything there is to know about Roswell. So let's go ahead and welcome Noe Torres on the line. Noe doesn't live in Roswell. He's down in Texas. And E.J. Wilson is in Roswell right now. Noe and E.J., welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Jerry. We're both very happy to be on your show today. This is Noe connecting with you from South Texas, and my friend E.J. is also with us.
E.J., how are things going in Roswell? I think we lost E.J. already.
I think we may have lost him momentarily, but I'm sure
we'll bring him back here in just a second. Noe, when we talked to you about UFOs, how many books have you written anyway?
Okay, well, Jerry, this has been a wild journey for me and a wild adventure, and I started it way back in 2004 when I worked with my good friend from California, Ruben Uriarte, on the very first book that we did, and that was Mexico's Roswell, the Chihuahua UFO crash, way back in 2004, 2005, early 2005. Ruben and I worked on that book. We went down to Mexico where these small plane reportedly had a mid-air collision with a UFO back in 1974 near the Texas border with Mexico. And so that was my very first foray into publishing about the UFO topic. And since then, I have done, believe it or not, Jerry, 6 additional books, including the most recent of which is a book I co-authored with E.J. Wilson, which is The Ultimate Guide to the Roswell UFO Crash. And we've just turned out the 2nd edition of our book, which is currently in the city of Roswell. It's the best-selling book, according to our friends Gene and Linda over at Roswell Landing.
And both of those people you just mentioned, both Linda and Gene, are big boosters, and we've worked with them off and on over the years. In fact, they had the Cover Up Cafe. If you remember that, that's the first time you and I and Ruben got together to talk about that first book. Remember that? Way back there.
One of our most pleasant, one of my most fond memories is my first trip to Roswell in 2007. And you were very kind to invite me as a newbie in the field to appear on your show at the Cover Up Cafe, which was, right across the street from the Roswell Landing, which is Roswell's best bookstore, by the way. And you and I and Ruben had a wonderful interview together, which I suppose is still available in your archive somewhere, isn't it?
Yes, it is. They can go over and just put in Roswell, and it's on the Roswell page. We're redoing that page, by the way, in time for the 65th anniversary to make we've done so many shows from Roswell. It's been I'd hesitate to say how many, 25 or 30 anyway, that are still around. And we did about 10 a day each time we were there. And we were there for 7 or 8 years. So there's quite a few shows, and we're going to pick out the best ones. And that show that we did with you and Ruben, of course, is one of the best ones. A couple of others, too, you've done quite well. And then one of the things I always liked about Roswell was going out to the Army Air Base and imagining things happening. And lo and behold, E.J. Wilson, who's back on the line now, I think. E.J., how are you?
Hey, yes, it's good to hear from you, Jerry.
Yeah,
good to see you
welcome
again.
to the show. I don't know how we lost you, but we did. But we found you again, and I was just telling people that, and Noe especially here, that we used to go out to that Army Air Base and look at things. But then all of a sudden, you did a walking tour, and you've been doing that.
Yes, indeed.
And Noe as well, and you really brought all that stuff to life. Are you guys going to do something like that this year? or maybe it's not even going to be a walking tour anymore.
We're going to take it up a notch. Yes. Now, just very briefly on the history of the tour. After we came out with the book, The Ultimate Guide to the Roswell UFO Crash in 2010, for that festival, Noe and I were talking, and Noe says he's looking at a map, and he says, EJ, 9 of these locations are within walking distance of each other, really key locations that were directly involved with the crash. For example, where they did the autopsy, where the nurse met with Glenn Dennis, and where they took the bodies and wreckage and that sort of thing. So we decided for the festival, this is really excellent planning on Noe's part, that we would do walking tours. And so we did 2 tours. You were at one of them. Let's see, you were at the second one, weren't you, when we got rained on?
Yes, it rained on us, but it was well worth it. And I was going to...
That was just a little bit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was just a mist. And we had a lot of fun. So what's happening now, Noe and EJ, as far as the tour? You said brought it up a notch, EJ. What's happening?
Well,
okay.
Go ahead, EJ.
Go ahead, Noe. No, go ahead.
Okay. As EJ started to say a moment ago, we've decided to, the tours kind of developed after 2010, and EJ has continued moving forward with them. He gives tours pretty much on demand, mainly on the weekends, and he's developed quite a good following of folks who have given very positive feedback about his tours. So he has continued the walking tours, but this year we've been trying to partner up with a transportation company in the Roswell area that might be interested in being, with us on offering tours that are motorized, either using buses or vans, or other vehicles. So this year, we had the good fortune to connect with a fine gentleman in Roswell named Court Nichols, who is the owner of Blue Sky Transportation. And Court was just knocked out by the idea of taking the tours that we're already doing on a walking basis and actually getting them motorized, because one of the things that we most received comments about when we were doing the walking tours is there were a lot of folks who just were not comfortable in doing the walking that was required, which is, it's a substantial amount of walking, a little over 2 miles, isn't it, EJ?
Yes, 2.2 miles, but it's nice flat paved surface, so
it's an easy walk. It's not an insurmountable walk, but for some folks who are limited in the amount of walking that they can do, they really requested tours be motorized. So what Court did was he stepped in, and he's going to provide the vans. He's going to provide 2 vans and 2 drivers for us. And we're going to be doing 3 tours a day during the Roswell UFO Festival this year, which, for folks who may not know this, will be June 28th, which is a Thursday, through July 1, which is a Sunday. And the city's UFO celebration continues on through Monday, which is July 2nd. But usually things kind of start wrapping up on the Sunday. So we'll be offering those tours in the Roswell area, and we'll be being on wheels and motorized will actually allow us to do some neat things that we haven't done before, such as we're going to have audio clips of the principal witnesses in the Roswell UFO incident, interviews that they gave, later in their lives. We're going to be sharing with the passengers on our tours the actual words of the eyewitnesses who saw all this strange activity going on at the airbase after the crash. And we'll be doing special multimedia, audio segments with sound effects, narration, and eyewitness testimony on board the 2 special vans that will be outfitted for these tours. And it's going to be a great deal of fun, and we're really looking forward to it.
EJ, why don't you tell us a little bit about, and by the way, Noe, before I even get to EJ, that's great news about playing some of those audio clips and things. That sounds very interesting. And EJ, before we tell them how they can get on this tour and what to do about it, tell us a little bit about that tour. I know we went to Hangar 84.
Yes.
There's some other things we went to as well, including one of the things I thought was very interesting was the terminal itself, and where they loaded up the debris and took it on board. You might pick it up and tell us a little bit about what some of the things are that they'll be seeing.
Some of the key locations. Well, we'll pass by. One of the first locations that we'll pass on the way down to the facility, to the airbase, we'll be starting out in the vicinity of the RMAC, help me out here, Roswell Museum and Arts Center, and we'll be taking the buses down Main Street, and on the exact same route that they brought the convoy in, that did the recovery of the crashes, and we'll pass by the former location of St. Mary's Hospital, where two nuns recorded the sighting of the fireball in the sky northwest of town.
I knew the nuns had seen it, but I didn't realize they recorded it. How did you guys find that out?
It's logged. They kept a written record of that, and that's in our book, The Ultimate Guide to the Roswell UFO Crash. Also, corroborating evidence now, because of Mr. William Woody. We knew about Mr. Woody, and in the second edition of the book, I actually had located Mr. Woody living here in the Roswell area. I got pictures of his farm, where he and his father saw the same fireball in the sky at the same time the nuns recorded it, and their adventure when they went in search of more information about that. They actually got in the truck and went up the highway looking to find out more about the event, and they found that there were sentries posted at every exit from the highway. They were not allowed to leave the highway. So we have his testimony and a nice picture of Mr. Woody. He was 13 years old at the time. I guess he's close to 80 now. Very nice man, very knowledgeable, and willing to talk about it, which was refreshing for us as journalists to get the information. So that was corroborated. So we'll pass by the hospital. We'll pass by Ballard Funeral Home. We'll have enough time to take some photos from the van. We'll also go on down to the entrance to the base. We'll visit the what is now the Campus Union building for Eastern New Mexico University at Roswell. But at the time of the incident, this was the Officers Club, where the mortician, Glenn Dennis, and had met with his nurse friend, and we've got her name now for sure. That's corroborated from evidence we found.
You guys have really done some pretty good research.
Well, for the second edition, we dug kind of deep, and we had a suspicion of what her name was, but we didn't know for sure. Now we know for sure. So you'll hear about that on the tour when you come on the tour. Let's see. So where they met, we'll be there. Let's see. We'll do there the Campus Union building, the former Officers Club location. We'll get to see the hospital, or the grounds of the old hospital, which is a newer medical facility was built right next to it. I don't know if you can hear my little girl. She's a Cocker Spaniel. She's growling a little bit, and she wants a treat. Anyway, so where are we?
I thought maybe you had asthma there, but that's your dog. Okay.
I do have asthma, but I don't sound like that.
Noe, before EJ finishes here, What about that nurse? Can you tell us if she's still alive? I mean, Glenn Dennis, never heard from her again.
The nurse he met with, that was part of the intrigue, actually, of the event. She was actually disappeared, and we have the whole story about that. We know what happened to her. I don't know how much we were going to give away.
Yeah, no. You'd save it for the tour, but you can bet we'll be back talking about it again.
I do want to say, Jerry, that the nurse in question, whose name was Naomi Self, one of the key things that happened after the Roswell incident was that Glenn Dennis knew that there was great danger involved to all the individuals who took part and who witnessed these events. So he went out of his way, Glenn Dennis being the former mortician at Ballard Funeral Home, the one who was called by the military for advice on how to handle the bodies that had lain out in the desert, the one who went down to the Army Air Base and saw pieces of wreckage, and then later talked to this nurse who had been in one of the operating rooms and claimed she had witnessed the autopsy of two of these beings that had been recovered in the crash. So Glenn Dennis wanted to protect the nurse who had told him the story, drawn sketches of the alien beings for him, and in order to protect her, he basically constructed a story in which he stated that he had received notice that the nurse had immediately been transferred after the Roswell incident and had later died in a plane crash in the United Kingdom while serving at a military base there. But it turns out that that actually wasn't the case, and so it's kind of a convoluted story, and a lot of debunkers discredit all of Glenn Dennis's statements about the Roswell incident simply because he deliberately fabricated the whereabouts of this nurse and never gave her name until much later, research turned up the name. But because he was trying to protect her from what was certain to be retribution against her by the military and other agencies, but because of that, the debunkers, the naysayers, have always attempted to discredit all of Glenn Dennis's testimony, which is absolutely unfair, of course.
As we talk along here, E.J. and Noe Torres and E.J. Wilson, I want to let the listeners know it's okay to go ahead and start calling in. We have a couple of email questions already. And we'll just, as things come up, the reason I wanted to do this show was to get people involved and ask questions that, you, all three of us have been living with Roswell, and you guys know just about everything there is to know about Roswell, and so sometimes we miss something. It's pretty obvious to a listener who's just listening to it for the first time. Our number is 888-919-2355. That's 888-919-2355. I have a question here already, and they want to know if Glenn Dennis is still alive.
Yes, actually, Jerry, that's a very good question, and I appreciate your listenership being right on the ball. Mr. Dennis is alive. He lives in the Roswell area. However, he's in very fragile health and doesn't do public appearances anymore.
He was the last time I saw him, we did an interview, and he was not doing well even then.
Right. And
that was several years ago.
If, I recently was gathering data on Mr. Dennis, and I happened to do some internet searches, and I ran across a video interview that was done, I believe, by his granddaughter. recently.
Yes.
Like
yeah, I've had her
or
on the air recently, too.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I believe that's a great-granddaughter of the sheriff.
Okay, well, anyway, but what was posted on the website indicated that Glenn Dennis's health has been extremely fragile for a number of years. So, yeah, that's a very good question, and we appreciate that.
EJ, the tour has just barely begun here for our radio audience, and when they see it in person, I tell you, the ambiance of that whole place is just overwhelming sometimes, when you start talking and telling the stories. Don't you agree?
You do get a sense of history there, for sure. Yes, please go ahead. I was going to say something nice about Jerry. On the tour, he demonstrated a wealth of knowledge about the event himself, and actually took over the microphone for a little bit and did some narration of his own, which was very impressive.
I just butted in. I'm glad you guys. Didn't get offended.
It was a valuable contribution, Jerry, and we were wanting to sign you up as one of our tour guides afterward, but I know you have a busy schedule, so.
Yeah, and that 2 miles and 2/10 walk, even though I was in pretty good shape back then, I was running along trying to keep up with you guys anyway, and did a good job. But this thing, this year with the vans, that's great news.
Well, listen, Jerry, this is amazing. Folks are going to have a chance to hear the entire UFO crash incident story from start to finish. We've included the whole story in summary form as they make the rounds of all these fabulous sites full of history and full of rich detail and air-conditioned comfort. Folks will be hearing the actual eyewitnesses themselves through audio clip testimony. They'll be hearing the eyewitnesses speak and tell what they saw with their own eyes. There's been over 100 eyewitness affidavits filed from people who were around in 1947 in Roswell who saw bits and pieces of the incident and who knew for a fact that what they were looking at was nothing that had an earthly explanation. This is a way that we've come up with to tell the entire Roswell incident story from start to finish, include eyewitness testimony from the witnesses, key witnesses, and take people to each of these eerie, strange places so that they themselves can get a feel for how mysterious and how there seems to be a connection here with something unearthly, something beyond the norm. Especially, for example, the example that I love to give, the first time I visited the site of the alien autopsy, so-called, which is the former site of the Roswell Army Airfield Hospital, where the nurse, Naomi Self, said that she walked into an operating room and there were 2 Army doctors conducting an autopsy of these alien beings that had been recovered north of town. And I remember we were standing there at the very place where this occurred, and it was twilight. And EJ was with me, and my friend Ruben Uriarte was with me. And there was just this overpowering sense of something that is far beyond our understanding there. And it just kind of overwhelmed all of us, all 3 of us that were standing there. We just, this is something that is very difficult to explain in human language, but there is an energy, there is a presence there that continues to this day. And
I felt the same thing when I went to Hangar 84.
Exactly, there too. We got the same feeling. And folks will be able to experience this for themselves as we take them around and tell them the story.
Now we'll get into how they can go on the tour and how they make reservations here in a moment. But in fact, 2 people in the chat room wanted to know if Naomi ever told anybody what she actually saw.
To my knowledge, she unless some document turns up later from her family, her side of the story has never been told.
But she told Glenn and drew pictures of the aliens for him there at the Officers Club.
Yeah,
And,
I think Jerry meant other than the testimony that we have from Glenn Dennis.
Right.
But you're right. Other than Glenn Dennis, we don't have any documentation of her ever telling anybody else.
And the pictures that she drew there, are they pretty much what we think of as the little grays?
Yes. At the time, we didn't have a paradigm for those beings. Today, if you say gray, everyone knows what you're talking about. It's a short, between 3 and 4 feet tall, with the large heads, large almond-shaped eyes, slit for a mouth, and no nose but 2 holes, no external ears. They had 4 fingers, no thumbs. They had, on the ends of the fingers was like a suction cup appearance, kind of a concave appearance to the end of the fingers. The arms were long compared to ours in relationship to their bodies. They were about the size of a 10-year-old child, but with proportionately larger heads. So they were, that is kind of the standard gray now, but at the time, she did the only thing she could do. She drew this extraterrestrial being for Glenn there at the Officers Club. So, which I think was kind of like taking a chance because somebody had to see her talking with him about that stuff. But anyway, very interesting. So that was the beginning.
That certainly is. Before we go on any further, I think we need to tell people. You got a website or something, right, where you can register to go on these tours? I mean, they'll fill up pretty fast, I think.
Take it away, Noe.
Yes, sir. Well, basically, for the tours, EJ's website is roswelltours.com, roswelltours.com. And for our Roswell 2012 conference, which is kind of anchored by these tours, but also includes presentations by some very well-known.
I want to get into that too.
Yeah, that website is roswell2012.com. So that's our conference website, which includes the tours. roswell2012.com.
And we know we can't go on the entire tour, even though it'd be fun here on the air because we've got a lot of things to talk about. But if somebody wants to bring up something, we'll certainly answer the question. Our telephone number is 888-919-2355. It's toll free. When we talk about the tours, if both of you can answer this, one or the other or both. What do you think is the most interesting thing about the tour, EJ? Is there or are you just I'm kind of carried away with all of it?
Well, that's true. It's more of a holistic experience. It's something where you take in the whole thing, and it's surprising because people, even other UFO researchers who have gone on my tour from Australia and Europe. They will tell me that I was able to fill in gaps in their knowledge of the event. So we cover the history of it very thoroughly, but also we bring it to life. Probably one of the more fun things to talk about, it's all fun, of course, but is when we get to Hangar 84, and I tell the story of how I got inside to get pictures. Because as you know, nobody ever gets inside. Hardly. You have to have special permission.
The only reason I got inside is that they had not turned it over to this aircraft company yet.
Yes. Well, when I got there in September of 2009 for the book, it was interesting. I had missed the mark by about a block and a half, and and I was in the wrong place, and the only human that I could find was a gentleman riding on a riding lawnmower. I asked him if he knew where Building 84 was, and he said, sure, follow me. So we're following the man on the riding lawnmower a block and a half up to Hangar 84. We found it, no problem. That was very nice of him. I want to thank whoever he was publicly, so there you go. But then I said to Annie, my wife, who was riding with me while I was in the process of getting pictures, I said, okay, sweetie, I'm only going to need a minute or two to get some exterior shots, and then we can go. And she said, well, wouldn't it be better to get some from inside also? But I already knew that was impossible. And so I said, well, nobody gets inside. They're dismantling aircraft in there. It's a safety situation. She said, well, then all they can say is no. So to make her happy, I went inside and I spoke with the very nice manager by the name of Sinan Martinez. I didn't tell her anything about aliens or UFOs or anything like that. I simply told her that Noe and I were writing a book on the history of Roswell, and we'd just like to get a few pictures from inside. She said, sure. Well, you could have knocked me over with a feather, because I already was expecting her to say no so I could go back out and tell Annie and we could go, right? She said, sure. She took me on a nice tour of the place. Inside and outside, we're getting pictures of, planes being pulled apart and all kind of stuff. Then we come back inside, one end of the hangar, and she points to this little door on the side, little kind of a side room, and says, now remember, I never said anything about aliens or UFOs, but she said to me, do you want to see the little gray room? And, of course, that is where they took the grays after the autopsy. So they wouldn't stink up the whole hangar. They were giving off vapors and fumes and that kind of thing. So I said, ow, ow, twist my arm. And she took me in, and I was able to get pictures from inside the little gray room. And, of course, that's in our book. If you want to see the inside of the room where they took the aliens after the autopsy, I've got a couple of very nice pictures in there in the Ultimate Guide to the Roswell UFO Crash.
Yeah, one of the things that we all three of us think we're journalists, and we may or may not have good reputations. I think we all do about getting to the story. But one of the things that's always very humbling when we do these shows and people are in the chat room and they call in and things like that is they come up with questions that we should have asked. And when we're talking about the nurse, Noe and EJ, either one of you can answer this. Because I thought we made it pretty clear when Naomi was her name, met with Glenn in the officers club. Somebody wanted to know when was that? Well, it was the next day, wasn't it?
Yes, it was the day after she witnessed the autopsy being performed. What happened was she was coming out of the autopsy room and was basically sick, as were most of the people who were in that Roswell Army hospital. They were all getting sick when they were exposed to the fumes that were produced when the bodies were cut into. So she was rushing out of the room, actually headed for someplace to throw up or to rinse her face or something. And she ran into Glenn Dennis, who was coming in because he had brought a serviceman that had been injured in a motorcycle collision in town.
Yeah, back in those days, the funeral home operated the ambulances.
Yeah, his funeral home, Ballard, operated the ambulance service for the air base. So he was bringing in a serviceman that had been injured in town, had checked him into the hospital when all this commotion was going on, and there were, he noticed that there were pieces of wreckage out in the parking lot in some of the vehicles, Army vehicles that were parked there, and all these people were running around frantically inside the hospital. And the nurse came up to Glenn and said, "You better get the heck out of here. You're going to get in trouble. There's not supposed to be any civilians in here." And it was at that point, of course, that he realized that something really, really unusual was going on. Well, he left the base actually under force because in
the interview I did with Glenn, he said the military police escorted him out and they weren't too polite.
After he wasn't quick enough to leave after the nurse told him to get out of there, he still kind of hung around, and that's when some MPs came along and ushered him out of the base and in fact followed him back into town to make sure that he left. Well, he was extremely curious about what had become of the nurse and what exactly was going on. So he kept trying to contact her the next day, and she kept being unavailable. And then later the next day, she called him and told him that she wanted to meet with him at the Officers Club, which is one of the stops on our tour. It is now the Campus Union building for Eastern New Mexico University at Roswell. And in fact, that was the starting point for our walking tours back in 2010 when you joined us that summer, Jerry. We started the tours off at the Campus Union building. But anyway, back in 1947, July, Naomi Self sat down at one of those tables in the Officers Club, and she drew for Glenn Dennis the sketches of these beings that were being autopsied. They had really long, slender fingers with what looked like suction cups at the end, at the ends of the fingers. They were very, very thin and had large heads, large, dark, recessed eyes. You know, the traditional picture of the gray aliens. So that's
I don't guess Glenn held on to those papers. Probably didn't think much about it. I'd love to see those sketches.
He said he had placed them in with other papers there at the Ballard Funeral Home, and somebody was going through the files and removing the old materials many years later and threw them out. And this was prior. Yeah, this was prior to 1978, when Stanton Friedman began talking to witnesses in this case, and the Roswell story finally came out in a book in 1980 called The Roswell Incident, for which Stanton Friedman did most of the research. So prior to 1980, sometime between, of course, 47 and 1980, somebody pitched all those papers out, unfortunately, to our great loss.
We have some really good audio testimony from Glenn, from Glenn, and I got to say, I really admire the man because of what he said back to these MPs when they escorted him very roughly out of that hospital. And we have audio testimony of that story from him, and it's great. But in a nutshell, when they were escorting him out, they were telling him, "You were never here. Nothing happened. There was no crash." That sort of thing. And he said to them, "I don't have to do anything you tell me. I'm a civilian." One of the MPs then said, "Don't kid yourself, mister. If you tell anyone what you've seen, they won't even, you'll never be seen again." Something like that. Then Glenn says, "You know, my dad was a trapper, and he used to use fellas like you for bait." Good for him.
Hey, he was a spunky little guy. Still is, probably.
Yeah.
We're going to go on to the other things that you guys are involved in here, but first of all, let's, folks, if you want to get a question about what happened at the Army Air Force Base, you need to call in now or email me at jerry@jerrypippin.com, because we're going to change subjects here tomorrow. We're going to talk about what else is happening. Lots of things will be happening on the 65th anniversary, which will be actually a week earlier, starts in June. We'll get over that here in a minute. Our telephone number is 888-919-2355. What do you see as, either one of you can answer this, what do you see as happening as far as an official declaration that something happened? I noticed somebody up at the Area 51 Museum still trying to peddle that story that Annie Jacobson said, about there being a Russian flight down, and they had some teenagers that had been altered by Mingla. I mean, we get all kinds of these strange stories. and that are really hard to believe, but they keep coming out. And you have witnesses, and you have people talking that are credible, and I mean, just like what we've heard tonight. It's just amazing.
Exactly.
Well, one of the problems, Jerry, is that one of the problems is that Roswell incident is so well known worldwide that along comes a kook or somebody with very poorly documented information, and the minute that they say the word Roswell UFO crash, they immediately get attention. And so, unfortunately, those of us who look at the event for what the witnesses, the over 100 eyewitnesses say that they saw, those of us who try to put it in the context of what the eyewitnesses say that they saw, we get bombarded by these wacky theories, such as the one you mentioned. There are innumerable others that surface almost on a yearly basis. And it's unfortunate because it deflects people's attention away from the core truth that something extremely unusual happened in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947, for which there is, in my opinion, no earthly explanation.
Tell our audience a little bit about how to get to the tour, EJ, and you have any thoughts about what Noe said?
Okay, yes. I always tell people on the tours that this event was acknowledged by the United States Army on July 8, 1947. They flat out said, "We have captured a flying saucer." It was front page news all over the country, in fact, all over the world. And there was, and we have audio from the ABC news broadcast saying, "The Army says we've got a flying saucer." Now, that was on July 8th. That was the day before, then again on the 9th, that General Ramey ordered it to be a weather balloon. But they wouldn't go to all this trouble for a weather balloon, so we know for sure it wasn't a weather balloon. But this thing is self-corroborating.
I understand what you're saying, and it just seems to me that, and I've dealt with UFOs for decades now, there's the evidence is so overwhelming, and not all of it's third-party and second-party stuff. There's still people who left documents that were alive, and there's people actually sworn to statements, and some people are still alive.
Well, that's true. And then you have people who don't even know each other are telling the same thing from their perspective. For example, the nuns and their corroboration of Mr. William Woody, and they saw the same thing at the same time in the sky, and so even people that never even heard of each other are saying the same thing. That tells me something real happened, and this wasn't. As far as the lady now that with the weird theory about Russian cloning program back in the 40s, she gets her facts confused. I looked into it enough to realize she was confusing some of the German program at Peenemünde with the Russian program, and of course they never had anything to do with each other, and so that was just kind of cobbled together. I don't think anyone who's done their research will buy into that stuff. I just tell people, do your own checking. Don't even take my word for it. You can find out all you want to know and make up your own mind.
Okay, now, Tommy, do you know a guy by the name of Tommy Thompson back in those days? Anybody?
I'm not familiar with the name.
Yeah, evidently he supposedly told the Chamber of Commerce, or asked the Chamber of Commerce for permission on guidance to tell the public, and I'm not sure who he is. It just came from the chat room.
Is he pro-disclosure or something of this nature? I'm not sure.
I don't know. Maybe they'll feed us in a little more information on it. Just a couple of lines they sent me. And I've never heard of Tommy Thompson myself, so...
As far as how to get
maybe they can enlighten all of us.
Jerry, one of the interesting episodes in the whole incident was the involvement of the morning newspaper in Roswell, the Roswell Morning Dispatch. Now, most folks, when they see the big screaming headline about the Army having captured a UFO, they're looking at the evening paper, the Roswell Record from July 1947. But it so happens that there was another newspaper in town, and I think we were one of the first a few years back in the first edition of our Ultimate Guide to the Roswell UFO Crash. We were able to obtain an actual copy of the newspaper from University of New Mexico at Albuquerque, and they were very courteous and sent us a copy, which we included the front page of in our book. And of course, the editor of the morning paper at the time was Arthur McQuitty.
Yeah, and Art's going to be on with us later this evening.
That's right. He's now in his 90s.
Right.
But actually, the Roswell Morning Dispatch, which, it actually, by the time they published, the cover-up story was already in play about the weather balloon. But even so, reading those articles that appeared the next day when the cover story had already been brought out, there is a lot of things that don't quite, fit together. So it was interesting. And so they played an important role as well, along with the other media, the radio stations and the Roswell Daily Record. So one of the locations included in our Ultimate Guide to the Roswell UFO Crash is the former building that housed the Roswell Morning Dispatch. And we tell a little bit of the history that went on there with reference to the Roswell incident.
Is it a beauty shop or something now?
The Roswell Morning Dispatch is actually the gift shop at the UFO Museum, yes.
Okay. Very interesting. Okay, now, when are the tours going to be?
Okay, we're going to
yes, you were asking how to get there. And, well, I was just going to say the main thing to do is to stay tuned to the webpage, Roswell2012.com. But go ahead, Noe.
Yeah, so we're very excited this year. In addition to our tours, we're actually have, with the cooperation of many fine folks in the Roswell area, we are putting together a full-fledged conference, which we call the Roswell 2012 Conference. It's a 4-day conference that will be held at the Bassett Auditorium at the Roswell Museum and Arts Center. Thanks to the fine folks there at the Museum and Arts Center, which is one of the finest places for folks to visit, by the way, in the whole city of Roswell. A beautiful facility.
It certainly is.
Yeah, we must commend the director, Laurie Roof, and the board and all the staff members at the museum for welcoming our conference with open arms. We had run into some difficulties finding a place to hold our UFO conference. We have some nationally known and very prominent UFO researchers and authors who will be speaking at this event, and it's going to take place from Thursday, June 28th to Sunday, July 1st at the Roswell Museum and Arts Center at the corner of Main Street and 11th in Roswell, free and open to the public. We're not charging any sort of admission. And full information about the conference is at Roswell2012.com.
You're going to continue the tradition started by the city of offering free admission to these lectures. That's good.
Well, our intent here is that folks like myself, when I first visited Roswell, folks like myself wanting to get as much information as possible about the Roswell incident, wanting to hear what authors and researchers have to say about the case as well as other similar events. And so it gives visitors to Roswell another set of options, another source for information about Roswell's interesting history in terms of the incident. And folks like Dennis Balthasar, who is a nationally known ufologist, has appeared recently on the History Channel's Decoded series. He writes extensively about UFOs and the paranormal, and he'll be doing 4 incredibly interesting lectures for us at the Roswell 2012 conference, as will one of the leading experts on the Roswell UFO incident, Dr. Donald Burleson, who happens to be, by the way, the state director for the Mutual UFO Network in New Mexico. Dr. Donald Burleson is a retired college professor. He's been in MUFON for many, many years and has written a number of books about the Roswell incident and UFOs in general. And one of the most interesting topics that I'm looking forward to that Dr. Burleson is going to bring us, Jerry, is he's going to talk about UFOs and the murder of Marilyn Monroe. Now, I've not heard him do this particular talk before, so I'm really excited about it. And he brings in the whole paradigm of what was going on in the early 60s with all the massive waves of UFO sightings, the conspiracies involving the death of Marilyn Monroe and her connection to the Kennedy clan. And the whole thing sounds like an intriguing and amazing story, which he has written a book about, by the way.
Yes, I've read the book, and I've interviewed him about it, and they'll enjoy that lecture. And Dennis Balthasar, by the way, has some pretty interesting things to talk about as well. Who else do you guys have lined up?
Yeah, of course, we're going to have one of the premier Roswell historians. That is John LeMay. He has written a number of books on the history of southeastern New Mexico and the Roswell area. And he has also written recently a book called Roswell, USA, Towns That Celebrate Aliens, Lake Monsters, Bigfoot, and Other Weirdness. This has been a very popular book, which, by the way, I edited and published for him, in which John talks about how the Roswell UFO Festival came about, its early history. He talks about the first Roswell, or actually the other Roswell UFO museum that once existed in town. Now there is only one, but there was another called the UFO Enigma Museum, which was run by Clifford Stone, a well-known ufologist in the Roswell area.
Yeah, Clifford Stone lives there. Is he going to be on your lineup too?
He was originally in our lineup, but unfortunately health problems he's dealing with, and we wish him all the best, are going to prevent him from appearing at our conference.
Yeah, you know, that's very interesting. We had Clifford on the air a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. Paula Harris, and he wrote a book together.
Yes.
And that book that you're talking about, John LeMay wrote, this latest one is a great read. And John knows just about everything that ever happened in Roswell, including a lot of the old Western stories.
Exactly. Now, John and I have recently co-authored a book that has been an amazing seller for us. And although we targeted primarily to middle school, high school audience, it's been doing really well with the adult segment as well. And that is a book called The Real Cowboys and Aliens, UFO Encounters of the Old West. And what John and I did, because of John's interest in the early history of the United States, and especially the New Mexico and the western U.S., he was wanting to go back, after the movie, the Spielberg blockbuster movie was announced, Cowboys and Aliens. John said, why don't we take a look at actual UFO cases that occurred in the 1800s? And I thought it was a marvelous idea. And in fact, I had been thinking along the same lines myself. I had been thinking of doing a book on the Aurora UFO incident of 1897, which happened in Texas and involved the crash of a strange object in the middle of town.
Yeah, I guess they actually buried the little ET there in the graveyard.
Right, and it's the only UFO case that we know of where an actual state historical marker has been erected by the state of Texas Historical Society there at the site where this alien is supposedly buried. So John and I collaborated and co-authored this book, which basically chronicles actual UFO encounters between people in the Wild West of America in the 1800s, and actually the Aurora UFO crash became one chapter of our book. And as I mentioned, it's been wildly successful. We've done a lot with it in schools. John and I both lecture at schools. Of course, he lives in Roswell and I live in South Texas. So in our respective areas, we appear frequently to speak at schools and at other educational functions. I recently had the privilege to speak to over 1,000 educators here in South Texas at a regional education conference just a few months ago. We had over 1,000 local educators, and I spoke about our book, The Real Cowboys and Aliens.
John talks about that museum. I guess it's a historical society. They've got a display or something there in Roswell. EJ, do you know?
Yes.
Can you tell a little bit about that? Doesn't the historical society have quite a little exhibit there in Roswell itself?
I have been over there to that location. It's on Lee Street, just north of 2nd, if I recall correctly. And both John and Elvis Fleming were really
that's his name. That's
the
guy. That guy's he's really up with everything that ever happened in Roswell. Elvis.
Yeah, he
absolutely.
Actually, we were having trouble, Jerry and EJ. We were having trouble locating the actual location of the chapel that existed in the Army Air Base in 1947. And by the way, this is one of the more popular stops on our tour. Is the chapel is where the distraught airmen, after having been exposed to this very unusual event where suddenly they were confronted with these strange beings and talk of a spaceship having crashed north of town, a lot of them sought spiritual comfort in the Army chapel located at the Roswell Army Airfield back in July 1947. Well, we were having trouble finding because the building that was the Army chapel has been moved off the airbase, off the former airbase, which is now the airport, the Roswell Airport, and also part of the university there. So we were having trouble locating where the building is today, and when EJ connected with Elvis Fleming and John LeMay at the Historical Society for Southeastern New Mexico, they pointed us, and Elvis's memory is just fantastic. He remembered, the day that the year that the chapel was moved, and he knew exactly where it was. And so I sent EJ on a mission to go find it. And EJ, maybe you can tell us your initial finding of that place. We were so excited.
Well, it was great. We had boy, I could write a book about the adventures that I had writing, helping with the book, the first edition, and getting the pictures. I actually risked life and limb a couple of times. I don't think I ever even told Noe about it. But
this was one of those times. It. You just mentioned it.
Well, to get the shot at the chapel, the shot I wanted, the angle and everything. If you're an artist, that's all that matters, So I had to go across the street and climb someone's fence and kind of do a kind of a one-handed hang on and get the angle and elevation and the light that I wanted for that shot. And I did pretty good for an old man. I got a couple of nice pictures for the book.
And I think I sent you to a couple of wrong locations at first, didn't I, EJ?
Well,
it seems to me.
Well, yes and no. The thing on the Ballard, I had to go out into traffic. No, it wasn't good enough to get the shot from the median. I had a slightly nicer shot from out in the lane of traffic, so I'd have to wait and try to get my shots while there was a traffic light, but then there was a turn signal, and so I was stepping pretty lively there.
I'm
for
so
the
glad
picture.
you survived that, by the way, EJ.
For Ballard, but
I want to say to getting back to Jerry's comments, the Historical Society for Southeast New Mexico is what we're talking about. I'm a member of theirs, and anyone can join. If you'll just do an internet search for Historical Society for Southeast New Mexico, you'll find the fine work that John LeMay, Elvis Fleming, and others are doing to preserve the area's rich history and culture. And we have definitely received a lot of support from them. It's a wonderful place to visit. They have extensive archives of the area's history, as well as the museum, Jerry, that you mentioned earlier, which is open to the public. And they also have lectures and other programs going on there all the time. Their focus is, of course, on the history of Southeast New Mexico. And we were just so fortunate. John LeMay, who is on the board of directors for the Historical Society, is, as we had previously said, will be one of our speakers at the Roswell 2012 conference. He's going to be talking, this is a fascinating talk he's going to give, Before the UFOs Landed, A History of Roswell. He's going to bring us totally up to speed on how the town of Roswell developed through the Wild West days, the founding of it, and on down to the Roswell incident of 1947. So I'm looking forward to that talk, Before the UFOs Landed. He's also going to talk about his book that we've already mentioned, Roswell, USA, Towns That Celebrate Aliens, Lake Monsters, Bigfoot, and Other Weirdness. He's going to look not just at how the Roswell UFO Festival developed, but other similar towns in the United States that have similar, very strange festivals celebrating Bigfoot and so forth. And then he's also going to talk about the book that he and I co-authored, The Real Cowboys and Aliens. So it's going to be a doozy of a 4-day conference.
And I want to get back to that 4-day conference here in just a minute. But DJ, I'm dying to know you didn't get ran over, right?
Almost. I had a really harrowing experience when getting a picture of the St. Mary's location. I wanted to say something nice about John too. I want to thank John because due to his efforts, I guess he discovered that there is an actual connection between the Roswell crash and Billy the Kid. Now, does that blow your mind?
It certainly does. Billy the Kid was around way before 1947. So
you are correct, sir.
But are you saving that for the paying customers, or can we find out now?
Well, that's probably going to be a key point that he makes in this lecture there.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that, and
okay.
Bring your cameras. There will be lots of photo opportunities when you come to the tour and everything.
These lectures at the Bassett Auditorium, they're free, huh?
Absolutely free and open to the public. We invite everyone to attend. We're going to try to do as much publicity as we can to invite people out there. We're going to have the lecturers and the authors available to do book signings. They'll be there signing some of their books and selling some of their books. So, of course, that's strictly optional to the folks who are visiting. If they'd like to browse the book selection there and have their books, purchase their books and have them signed by the authors. And I need to mention also that EJ and myself will be doing 4 lectures as well on the work that we've done. One of the lectures that I'm looking forward to doing is EJ and I have put together a PowerPoint presentation with video clips and still pictures of the Foster Ranch debris field location as it is today.
Yeah, that's going to be a good one.
Yeah, EJ can tell us more about that if you have time.
Well, we do. I want to know. This is Jerry Pippin, by the way, and we are talking to EJ Wilson and Noe Torres about the 65th anniversary of the UFO crash, and a lot of information that no one knows about. And you brought up the Foster Ranch. EJ, you have something to say about that? There's a lot of questions.
Oh, yeah. Well, the thing is, people are always asking me when they call for a tour, do you take us to the crash site? Now, that's funny to me, but, not to them. But the thing is, it's 110 miles from here, and it's over some okay roads and then bad roads, and then wishing you had the bad roads, because at one point you're driving across a field. We had a very nice gentleman, Pat Flannery, with us, who's a geologist and used to work for the BLM, and he helped guide us and make sure we made all the right turns. But at some points, you're driving over dry stream beds and things like this. In other words, it is not practical to take humans up there on a tour. There's no infrastructure of any kind. There's no cell phone signal of any kind. No buildings. There's not even a bush to squat behind.
I don't think the public is aware of how, and I hate to use the term barren, but vacant, I guess some of that land is around Roswell. No wonder that's why they put the air base there and have White Sands Missile Range, because back in the 40s, it had to be pretty secret.
That was the foremost and the world's only atomic bomber group back in 1947. And so they were looking for a location that was out there, that was, well shielded and kind of not easy to find on anyone's maps. So that pretty much describes Roswell even today.
Yeah. This is
I got an email here from someone, and they wanted to know basically where were the bodies found, and if do you guys think there was a live ET as well? And was it at the Foster Ranch or where someplace else?
I'm going to let Noe handle that. I wanted to say one thing about the Foster Ranch location. And that is, for the 99.9% of you who can't go for practical reasons, get our book, The Ultimate Guide to the Roswell UFO Crash, because in the second edition we give you not only GPS coordinates, but, and this was Noe's plan, the QR codes, which is a web-enabled kind of a code that you can scan, and it will bring up the Google page with the entire route. So I wanted to put a plug in for that. Now, yes, go ahead if you would, Noe.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we were going to talk about the. What was the question again, Jerry?
Basically, this person wanted to know where were the bodies found, and was there a live ET, you think, or?
Actually, this gets to the very heart of the Roswell incident. Determining the exact crash location and the recovery point from which the bodies were taken by the military and brought into Roswell to the Army Air Base, which is the location of our tours tonight. Now, interestingly, we've just been talking about the debris field at the Foster Ranch, which was approximately 110 miles northwest of Roswell, not in the same county at all. Roswell, of course, is in Chavez County, and this actually took place, the Roswell, the debris field is actually in Lincoln County, and so it's over 100 miles away. Now, that was just a skip site, as it is referred to, or a bounce site. We believe that the Roswell craft struck ground and emitted or expelled a lot of debris. It covered a wide area and a couple of bodies as well, which were later discovered by Rancher Mac Brazel and one of his neighbors, a young boy who was one of his neighbors. But the craft didn't actually go down, according to the many documents that we've looked at and eyewitness testimony. It didn't actually go down at the Foster Ranch. That was simply a skip site. The craft was able to regain its flight for a short distance beyond the Foster Ranch, traveling in a more or less east-southeast trajectory. And Don Burleson has done quite a lot of work on the probable trajectory of the craft following its, the process that began breaking it up. Dr. Burleson, as I mentioned, is a retired college professor of mathematics, and he has done a lot of work in attempting to calculate the probable trajectory. But what we think happened is that it continued flying in distress, but airborne, for approximately 40 to 50 miles beyond the Foster Ranch, and actually crash landed in the northwestern part of Chavez County, about 50 miles due north of the town of Roswell. And it was from this final crash landing site that the bodies and the majority of the larger pieces of the ship, including what is commonly referred to as the cabin or the crew compartment, were later recovered by the military. And all of the debris, the larger debris and the bodies, were paraded by the military in convoy fashion under tarps through the middle of downtown Roswell, heading south through Roswell in broad daylight early one morning after the recovery. And, of course, that convoy of military vehicles, which included armed soldiers, made its way back to the Roswell Army Air Base, which was located south of town.
Well, that was about the only way they could get to the
right.
base. They didn't have any other roads, I don't think.
And to answer the question about a live ET, we have numerous affidavits from eyewitnesses stating that there was a live ET seen at the air base. And we also have sworn statements from other eyewitnesses who saw a live ET at the second crash site, which is the final crash site, where the actual crash landing occurred after the object first hit and bounced over at the Foster Ranch. So apparently one of the ETs, one of the crew members, did survive for an unknown period of time after the recovery and was still alive at the time that the debris and the ET bodies, the other ET bodies, were brought to the air base. And this is why EJ and I were talking about how really the majority of the Roswell incident occurred at the base rather than at some, isolated desert location way out north of town. Now, the crash may have occurred out there, but everything was quickly recovered and everything was brought into town. And for the next few days, the debris and the bodies and everything was there at the Roswell Army Air Base where we conduct these tours. That's where it all happened, really.
Let's talk about the time that this happened. Was it on July 4th, about midnight, or when?
Yes, just a few minutes before midnight, the 4th of July, 1947. The nuns recorded in their logbook, I think, about 10 minutes before midnight. But and at the same time, since here in New Mexico we were having one of our famous thunderstorms whereby you get a lot of thunder and lightning, but very little rain, if any. And that was the situation on the Foster Ranch when the foreman at the ranch, Mac Brazel, he reported he heard thunder and lightning and also a crash that was not thunder or lightning. And so, of course, the next morning was the 5th of July, and that's when Mac on his horse and neighbor 10-year-old Dee Proctor on his horse, they came upon the debris field. So that was.
Did I understand you guys correctly that Max Brazel and the young man, the kid, they found two bodies? Or do you know?
Well, at least one body. I don't quite know how many. Maybe Noe's got some clarity.
We don't have an exact number, but our understanding is that there were at least 2 bodies recovered just on the edge of the Foster Ranch, several days after the initial finding of the debris field, when Rancher Mac Brazel did some further investigating of the area around the debris field. That was when he and Dee Proctor discovered this other debris area, and in that other debris area was, or scattered among the debris, were a couple of ET bodies, which he later complained to one of the radio announcers in town that he wanted to find a way to do something about them because they were stinking up the whole place.
Yeah, everyone seems to have the story that the corpse of the ETs smelled pretty bad.
Yes, that's a fairly consistent thread throughout all of the eyewitness testimony that mentions bodies, actually. At the air base, the stench got so bad that they had the autopsy that was being performed at the base hospital. The bodies had to be moved out to the aircraft hangar, which is now called Building 84. And then later, even that got to be too much, and they moved the bodies way out to a tent, a military tent that was set up on an impromptu basis out on one of the runways at one of the bay's underground little platforms that were used to load the bombs onto the bomber planes. So
it was more than just decaying flesh. It was some other vapors or fumes that were really noxious fumes to the people that were trying to work with these bodies.
What do you mean by that?
Noxious fumes. In other words, this wasn't just decaying bodies. There were other fumes that was beyond that because it was so strong that they had to move it outdoors.
We don't know if it was a chemical reaction of the whatever substances were in those bodies as they reacted with the Earth's with the oxygen in the air. We're not certain what caused it, but there was a horrendous stench that just instantly made everybody sick that became exposed to it. In fact, the nurse told Glenn Dennis that the entire hospital had to be cleared out of all staff after the autopsies were initiated because of this horrid smell.
We could go on for hours, but we have to wrap this up. Our time's almost up, so let's go over exactly what's happening here for the 65th anniversary, as far as you guys are concerned.
Okay. Well, we have some very exciting events to share with the public, foremost of which is the fact that we are doing narrated van tours of the Roswell incident.
And they're not just narrated, you have some sound clips of actual witnesses.
Exactly. We have live narration as well as sound, multimedia. We have sound effects and also clips of the eyewitnesses actually speaking about what they saw in 1947. So we'll be doing 3 tours a day beginning June 28th, which is a Thursday, and running through July 1, which is a Sunday. But even to go along with that as a complement to it, at the Roswell Museum and Art Center, which is a beautiful facility located right next to the convention center in Roswell, the corner of Main and 11th Street, we will have a 4-day conference featuring some of the best known UFO researchers in the field, including, as we've already mentioned, Dennis Balthasar and Dr. Donald Burleson, as well as John LeMay, E.J. Wilson, and myself will also be speaking. And we'll also have a presentation on UFO hunting techniques by a fantastic group in Laredo, Texas, called the Laredo Paranormal Research Society. So we've got a lot of interesting activities. And people can find out a lot more at Roswell2012.com. That's Roswell2012.com.
EJ, you got anything to add?
Wow. I just, we're excited about it. Come and meet the people. It won't cost anything to attend the conference, and I think it'll really add to the festivities there at the festival. In other words, your festival won't be complete without doing the conference, at least.
E.J. Wilson, do you have a book besides the one that we're talking about? I mean, Noe's got so many books here, I can't plug them all.
Yes and no. I have one I've been working on for about 20 months now. It's my agent has unfortunately sworn me to secrecy.
Well, it's hard to plug it then.
Pardon, what kind?
I said it's hard to plug it if you got sworn to secrecy. Come on, give me a clue.
It is about the history of a certain TV show, and that's about all I can say. But, it'll be fantastic with lots of screen captures and goofs and trivia and fun things. There's just going to be it's huge. I'm at over 300 regular-sized pages now, but it'll be great when it comes out. I'm thinking it'll be out in 2013.
Yeah, now Noe, he's writing a book that's not about UFOs. Have you ever written anything besides UFO and paranormal books?
Actually, I have. I started off writing, like John LeMay, I was writing books about the history of the area where I grew up, which is South Texas. And I wrote a couple of books about the history of professional baseball in South Texas that were fairly well received. One of them was named the Book of the Year by the local newspaper down here, and that was
That's great.
That was my book called Baseball's First Mexican American Star: The Story of Leo Najo, who was a ball player from the teens, long before racial integration in professional sports. Long before Jackie Robinson. He was drafted by the Chicago White Sox in 1926, and he is believed to have been the first Mexican-American professional ball player. Of course, nowadays you see a lot of Hispanics in all phases of baseball, but back in 26, it was something that was unheard of.
So is that book still available?
Yeah, that's available also through our website, roswellbooks.com. They'll see all the books that I've written, both UFO and non-UFO related.
And what's your latest book? Didn't you write something with Ruben?
Yes, Ruben Uriarte and I have just released a book about a month or so ago called Aliens in the Forest. And the subtitle is The Cisco Grove UFO Encounter. And it's an amazing story about a gentleman named Donald Shrum, who in September 1964 was out bow and arrow hunting in the Tahoe National Forest of Northern California when he encountered a tremendously large UFO, at least 90 feet across. And then a smaller ship came out of this, and then some strange-looking beings started moving toward him. He got up in a pine tree and basically battled for his life for 12 hours.
Wow.
Over the course of he became separated from the other hunters that he was with. One of the other hunters saw the arrival of the mothership, but was removed from the area where Mr. Shrum had his encounter. So it's an amazing story.
The name of the book again is what?
Yes, Aliens in the Forest: The Cisco Grove UFO Encounter, available at roswellbooks.com. And it is, by the way, Jerry, I need to say, it is the best-selling book of all the UFO books that we've done, either myself individually or with my partners, Ruben, EJ.
Well, we're going to have you and Ruben on sometime to talk about that book.
Absolutely.
We're out of time
by
now,
the way,
guys.
we've got audio clips of the principal witness, Don Shrum, that we can share with you that's have never been heard elsewhere.
Well, we'll set up a date probably pretty soon. Well, I'll talk to you about it off the air.
Absolutely.
EJ and Noe, I appreciate both of you coming on. And folks, stay tuned. We have Art, the editor of the morning newspaper, and his interview coming up a little later in the show. And I got a couple of things I want to talk about, Rendlesham and another subject, and then we'll be back. So thanks for listening to the Roswell story, and it's always fun with you guys because you know so damn much. I'm impressed.
Well, hopefully we don't know too much to where it will come after us. But thanks
very much, guys. This is Jerry Pippin. We'll be right back. But first, let's pause for this word.